I'm delighted that you have found the Mindset Mentor Meets podcast. I'm Angela Cox, your host and indeed the Mindset Mentor, and I'll be interviewing executives and founders at the top of their game to find out what lies beneath. I want to know what makes people proud, how they define success, what holds them back, and indeed what drives them forward. This is authentic and natural conversation with the best in the business. So listen in, enjoy, and if you love what you hear, please do leave a review. And now, over to today's guest. Hello and welcome to today's podcast. Now, my guest today, I first met him in 2013. And then I liked him so much that in 2016, I started to work for him. And then I haven't seen him actually face to face since 2019 when I left that organization, which is most remiss. We need to sort that out. Martin Gibson is sitting in front of me on Zoom now. He is probably one of the most genuinely humble people that I know. And yet he's quietly superhuman, though he won't like me saying that. He is an MD at GoBeyond Partners, which is part of the Web Help Group. And before that, he had 22 glittering years in the Royal Air Force. He doesn't look old enough. Martin, it's a pleasure to see you on Zoom. How are you?
I'm well, Angela, and a pleasure to see you again. And yes, we will find the person you just introduced in a moment and bring them. But in the meantime, you've unfortunately got to talk to myself. I'm keeping very well. Thank you very much. And yourself?
I am so good. And it is so nice to see you again. I mean, I know it's been quite a few years since I last saw you, but it literally feels like I saw you yesterday as soon as you pop up on the screen. And that's the joy of you.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, and I don't know what happened the last 2 years. I think something happened, but we can sort of ignore that.
That big C thing. We'll just brush over that. Well, you're there in your home. Are you still in Cheshire?
I'm still in Cheshire, yes, in the rural Iddles of Cheshire, something like that anyway. So,
the Cheshire set.
Yes. Well, it's on the very south border of Cheshire, we should add, really.
And I'm down here in Chichester, so we're like miles away from each other.
Mm.
And yet through Zoom, it's like we're in the same room. It's fun.
I know, yes. Well, this is what we've got used to, isn't it? And who would have thought it? It's just talking to a client this morning, and he was, I'm really sorry, this has failed and that's failed, and the rest. And you go, well, 2 or so years ago, we would have had a nervous breakdown if one of our online meetings, something had happened. We would have all run to the tools. Exactly. Now you're almost like, whatever. Yeah. You know, sorry, somebody's at the door, right, I'll see you in a moment. And I think in consulting, actually, whilst it's more difficult to build some relationships and have some, get those going, actually in consulting, those moments create some of those opportunities to do that. So I think for me, there are much greater benefits being face-to-face and in person, but living in the normal world and relating to that for everybody has broken down some of those barriers. I do believe in that space.
Oh, I so agree with you. And it's just made everything a bit more human, hasn't it? The kind of kids in the background, dogs barking, all of that is okay now. Whereas you say before, it would have been like, oh my God, panic.
Well, you reflect on that, the chap whose child walked, crashed through the door on the news, and that made headline news. Well, now it's almost like, when doesn't that happen?
But not with your children, because your children are now university age, which feels like madness. Where does the time go?
Yes, very much. And they're both enjoying it. I mean, the eldest had her first year in the sort of September of the COVID year, so a bit of a challenge, and sort of the challenges with that. But they've both done well, both doing well, and we're now sort of, I suppose, empty nesters as such, trying to figure out what you then do. What do we now do with this time we have? But we're definitely filling it, that's for sure.
God, Jane, like loads of travel now and all sorts of weird and wonderful projects, knowing you.
Yes. Well, I've got a car engine and loads of bits in the garage. But you
were telling me that. I was like, poor Lindsay. Honestly, I feel for her. And we were saying, weren't we, don't be bringing the bits into the lounge, whatever you do, because that's exactly.
Well, you've got to warm some parts up, so the lounge is the best place. But
not allowed. Now, we're here on the podcast to talk about your proudest moments. And I did refer to you as a bit of a superhuman because I know over the years you've done loads of different sort of sporting feats and, crazy marathon running and all sorts of things that you do that I think make you a superhuman. But I'm interested to know what your proudest moments will be, because that humble side of you, I know, will come into play, as it always does. So we're going to go through your top 3 of many, and we'll start with the first one, have a conversation, see where it takes us. So hit me with it.
Yeah, okay. So probably no particular order. I suppose for me, and it's not a moment, it was a period of time. So I was very fortunate whilst I was in the RAF that I got commissioned and they put me through university. And then at a point they said, or I applied to do an MBA. So this was 2001, something along those sorts of lines, 2001, 2002. It was an executive MBA. So it was a sort of 2.5, 3 year period of time, during which time my youngest daughter was born. I changed jobs 3 times, promoted, moved house twice. My father passed away, unfortunately, during that period of time. And I think it was just, you sort of reflect at the time, you just move on, you get on and get on with these things. But now looking back, holding that all together, many people who listen to this will reflect on periods of time where there's been lots of challenges. And I think, you sort of live at it at that moment. But for me, it was looking back at that sort of managed to do all those things, get out of it at the other end, out the other side, graduate with the MBA, move on to another job post, following that sort of thing. And I think that for me was, is proud for me, but also I think proud reflection of the family, my wife, the kids, the wider family that sort of brought us all through that period of time. Because, working and doing, again, I'm sure some of your listeners will be in the same place, probably previously, or they will be now, doing something as an executive MBA or anything that's a part-time, an open university course or anything like that on the side, it sucks up so much time. You disappear a couple of hours in the evening, you disappear at the weekends. It's sort of, it does take an awful lot of time to get through those.
Yeah. And it's almost like in saying yes to that, you have to say no to certain elements of your life, don't you? Which very often means that the family are kind of picking up the slack of that. But their resilience to be able to keep going with that time commitment, the pressure of the hours that you need to put in for a prolonged period of time, on top of all of that relentless change. I mean, that's fascinating that you found the wherewithal to be able to do that. There must have been evenings where you were just like, oh, I'm so over this. I want to kind of jack this in.
Yeah, another HR 1,500 word assignment.
Yeah, who wants to do that when I've just changed my job or we're moving house? So how did you find that resilience to stick at it?
I suppose there was a couple of things for me, the family obviously around you and the need to just sort of try and work together as a group. You mentioned fitness. For me, it's always been my, I suppose, bit of a go-to place to sort of go, and whatever I do with that, generally it used to be running till I sort of decided that my knee was going to give up on me. Just to find yourself, but get yourself out to go and do something. I think that was the key for me. And also, I suppose there's so many things going on, and you could, if you sort of let them all build on you. And I suppose this is probably something, whether it's I've learned it or whether it's just I'm naturally that way inclined, but not to let them build, just to sort of almost that you can control, and I suppose you think about in our world of consulting, there's things you can control and things you should worry about and you need to do something about. Other activities, other issues you don't have control over. And I think, again, people can let those build up on them where you have nothing you can do about it. I couldn't deal with some of those situations because, do you know what? They just were there. And you know this yourself from the last 18 months for sure. And you've got us almost, don't sweat the small stuff and all those sort of things. And that's probably been my path to a lot of how I've sort of dealt with my career and over the years is I've just got on with it. And those things I worry about, I will absolutely, truly worry about, and I will be absolutely concerned about. But I quite quickly discount the bits that I go, can't deal with it. I can't influence it. It is what it is. And then we sort of move on. So I suppose for me, those two parts have played key to me, getting out, running, cycling, going to the gym. Not I go to the gym, but going to do boot camp sort of stuff has been sort of key to that. And then, if it's not that, now I know when I first entered consulting, I suppose that was a bit of a challenge for me in that I
came different from where you'd been.
Came from a military background where, and we'll talk probably about one of those in a moment, what an incident that occurred. And I'm not playing this again. People from probably a military background will understand this. You're in situations that are, high pressured. you're putting people into certain situations that could mean they wouldn't come back.
True life or death.
Yeah, and then you go into sort of the business context, and it's sort of, my God, this is terrible. And you're sort of going,
a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is death.
It's not truly. I get, and I did take a while, and I do from certain things we worked together with, feedback was a bit like, well, it's a bit irrelevant, about that sort of stuff. And yeah, I am really. And I had to learn in some respects to sort of pick yes, that's truly important to you, and understand how it was important to others, not necessarily how it reflected on my level of consequence or outcome. So yeah, it was always there.
But that backdrop of perspective, when you've been in those really challenging situations, to be able to anchor back to that on days when you're thinking, oh God, I can't be bothered writing a 10,000 word essay. It is on that scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is death. Where is this? And I guess that gives you that resilience to move forward. And you're a sticker anyway. I mean, you do stick at stuff and don't tune out of it.
Yeah, much to the annoyance of my wife at times. So
she is a saint, your lovely Lindsay. She is a saint.
That's all you can ever hope for.
So I love that one. And I'm guessing that moment when you had the cap and gown was a proud one.
Very much indeed. Yes, yeah, it was a good day. I mean, some days you can sort of, they're photographed into your mind, and this was definitely one of those ones. And so you're in military uniform, and then you've got a cap and gown on top in a marquee. The sun was beating down. It was a swelteringly hot day. So yeah, definitely one of those ones where you sort of remember it for a long, long time to come. And it was nice because, my mum came, my wife, the kids, and the mother-in-law. So it was a really nice, sort of family day to celebrate a number of points, as much as anything else. That sort of, the graduation from that day of spending 3 and a bit years, or 2 and a bit years, should I say, trying to learn stuff that sort of, I'm sure it's still there somewhere in the memory, double book entry keeping or whatever it was.
It does just disappear, doesn't it? I mean, we spend all this time learning, and then it's like, what was the point in that?
It's something will stick. So bits will stick.
Somewhere.
The detail, yes, yeah. I do look back at books now and go, that's my handwriting. Who wrote those fantastic words? Because I'm sure it wasn't me.
Comes through in like a pub quiz 10 years later. And it just,
absolutely, yeah.
That's what you need it. So tell me about your second one then. What have you got for us?
It sort of links into that one, and I can't necessarily go into the details of this, but whilst deployed in Iraq, there was an incident with a couple of, so my role, number of roles in the RAF, one of my roles was as what's called the senior engineering officer on a helicopter squadron. And with those helicopters, we would deploy them all over the place, but we had a number deployed in Iraq in the mid 2000s. And I can sort of remember the moment the phone call came in. There'd been an incident. We'd had a situation with a couple of the helicopters, and I needed to then fly from my location to where they were, deal with that situation rapidly. We had challenges that meant we needed to deal with it in a very quick time because of issues that would cause other challenges if we didn't do that sort of thing. And I suppose it was the coming together of all the training I'd had whilst being in the military. That moment where you had a lot of people looking at you as the person on the ground. So had that happened in the UK, there'd have been a plethora of very more senior officers, very more intelligent people, I'm sure, dealing with it. And you sort of wouldn't have been there. You'd have just been part of it. But I was literally the senior person in that place. So it was, the military training, the military ethos of everybody around me, doing exactly what we needed to do. So you knew when you said, right, this is what we need to do, it would happen because the team would go and do it. But they were looking for you for that instruction and for that leadership. And there's only probably been, people think about when you're an officer, a senior officer in the military, that everything is about you tell people what to do and they go and do it. And actually it's far from that. The reality of it, and the people they've been in the military talk about mission command and other parts, is that everybody is expected to know in some level what they're doing and go and do those sorts of things. So it's actually very rare that you have to say to somebody, right, you are going to do that. And that's ultimately the decision and they come, few, but when
you're almost
like
a conductor rather than a director.
But when they do come, everybody they know, because of course the situation is such that everybody understands what it is. So they know that moment in time. And we did, we got through it. There were a number of challenges that needed to be overcome by a bit of problem solving. So you're in the field doing some problem solving, which again is fundamental to what we do in our world of consulting. But you're there, it's real. We had to, do some lifting of certain items. And it's literally, well, we think this will work. Okay, well, let's just do it. We couldn't sort of wait for a safety engineer to come out or a risk manager. It was like, well, look, we've got no real choice because the other choice is, nothing will happen. So, and I think, again, all of those parts came together as an engineer, as an officer, and as a leader of men, and as just as a person wanting to achieve an outcome. And, 48 hours later, not having slept a wink, we sort of managed to get the outcome we were looking for. And everybody then just carried on, and we couldn't stop and go, right, well, that's it, we're done, because actually the rest of the operations were still going on, so we needed to continue. And they did. The guys just made their way through it, and it was a proud moment in terms of what we achieved. I wouldn't want the situation to occur again, but what we got as an outcome, how we all bonded and worked together in that moment in time, and it was probably the sort of the essence of serving in the military. It was those moments in time you go, yeah, that's what it's all about. Because actually, a lot of the time when you're in the military, you're spent either training or preparing. You don't, yes, we went through a period of time where it felt like we were only ever continuously on operations, sort of mid 2000s to late 2000s. But, it sort of moved on. But, that was definitely one of those moments.
And that for me is that kind of superhuman element of you. And I know you wouldn't describe it as that, but that wherewithal to be in that situation, be the leader, not be flustered. I mean, your body must have been in fight or flight, and the adrenaline must have been like right there. Fear must have been there as well. And I'm wondering what the moment of reflection was like at the point where you were able to stop and actually look back on what you and your people had achieved. What did that feel like?
Probably elation. A few days later, we recovered what we needed to recover, and we went and looked at it in a safe environment. And at that point, right, okay, we've done what we need to do. We've got it to where we want to get it to. So I think at that point, you sort of went, could we have done things better? Yes, we could have done things better. Could we have, had some different outcomes? Definitely. But I think at that moment in time, you just sort of, and there probably wasn't really a moment where you went to sit back, because we were continuing. We were there for another 2-3 months sort of thing on operation. So there wasn't necessarily a moment in time where you could go, right, wow, great, rest and relax. But I think there was that moment when I went and looked at them and went, right, and felt comfortable and content that we'd done what we needed to do to get that outcome. So for me, I think, there wasn't a massive and here we go sort of thing, because things were still going on, but definitely a moment when, okay, we've got that, great. And next sort of thing, what's the plans to pick up what we now need to do to pick up this situation. So it was interesting and definitely an experience not to be repeated.
It's that humility, you see. It's that kind of, there's not really a massive pat on the back that you ever give yourself. And there are times when you really deserve one. I get this sense that the pride is about what you all achieved rather than what you led. But, we can all hear, I hope, as listeners, that it was about what you created. And I'll give you the pat on the back, even if you don't. So that military background is very different. But as you say, some of the essences of that are what you do now in consulting. So that kind of problem solving mindset, not in so much of a life and death situation, even though some people feel like it is. How do you now take what you've learned from the forces and use that to lead the teams that you lead in a consulting environment?
Probably the key one, and it's in every sort of leadership book, is for me personally is role modeling. But we don't want to follow you in terms of your role modeling. We'll all be running marathons. No, but I suppose in the world of consulting, we go in, we understand the client's problems, we work to solve what they are, and I suppose for me in that world, it's always been about, look, I want to get in there, I want to show how we can do this, and therefore I bring the team alongside me. And whether that's both my team, as in the consultants that we come with, or the client's team, because yourself, you've been there. A lot of what we do is actually working alongside clients to bring their skill set up, to bring them to a place where they can do this themselves. We aren't a consultancy that is purely about, well, we come and do it, we know it, we leave you not knowing anything. That's a failure for us. That's a failure for our business. That if we leave a client not knowing more than they did when we start on how to do this for themselves, then that's not success. We know that's not success. So, and that's what I mean sort of in that role modeling in terms of how we want to work together to achieve those sorts of outcomes. So, that's a big key part that that I hope that I had when I was in the military, and I hope I have now very much in the world of consultancy and how we then operate in that space.
And it's interesting for me because I've worked with you as a client. Mm-hmm. I work with you as a consultant, contracting with you. And then I worked for you when I joined the consulting firm. And
no, never. You've never worked for anybody, Angela. Come on now.
Really? I was going to go on to say, I never felt like I was working for you because you don't do that kind of command and control type behavior. I always felt like it was collaborative. I felt supported. But one of the biggest reasons I loved working with you was we had such a great time. I mean, there was so much fun wrapped around the seriousness of what we were there to deliver. But I mean, we would just laugh a lot. And that was one of the reasons I loved working alongside you, because it was just fab. And I think that's one of the things you bring over and above so many other people that I've worked with, which you wouldn't necessarily expect from someone who's come from such a serious military background. Yeah. But actually, that's that essence of morale.
Yeah, and that's the essence of, I suppose, who I am at the core, really, is, yes, we absolutely need to be serious, and we can be serious in those moments that require it. But, the world has got enough of that. We do need to. And I found that, again, there's certain people that doesn't work for. And you're right, certain people that isn't the way you operate with them. That's not how you get the best out of them. But bringing that ease, when we're there at midnight and we're trying to pull together that final pack for the presentation that's going to be at 9 o'clock, and we're going, oh my God, where is that final piece of data? Yes, we could get absolutely serious and we could get really stressed about it, but it won't help. No. It's not, again, comes back to that whole point. What can I control? What can't I control? If I can control the mood in the room in order to alleviate things I can't control, i.e. the data set isn't there, whoever told us they were going to provide us with the information didn't provide us with that information, whatever it is, which is generally what causes some of those challenges. Yeah, do you know what, guys? We can stress about it, but you're not going to move any faster. That person's now switched their laptop off and they've gone home and they're not coming back till 8 o'clock. So do you know what? Disappear off, we'll come back at 8 and we'll be on them at that point. I suppose that, and that, that lightheartedness behind it to bring some personality. Because, I suppose my view on these things are, we all happen to have a life and be a person outside of this thing called work. So why do we feel this natural urge to go, here's 9 o'clock, here's 5 o'clock or 6 or 7 or 8, depending on what the world is. And therefore I'm going to sort of shutter on those ones. Yeah. I don't think it brings the best out of people either. If they've got to try and turn their personality in a different way for that type of environment.
Yeah, there's no mask wearing with you. That's what I love.
No.
That's what I love.
Not clever enough. I knew if I tried to be something different, I'd just confuse myself. And then why are you looking confused? I'm thinking, who am I meant to be now? It just wouldn't work.
Too complicated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Definitely beyond my level.
So number 2 was a big one. What have you got for number 3?
So number 3 was, a client dear to our hearts that we worked with for a good 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it was. And the sector, it was the service industry. So this was a company that provided catering, security, reception, all those sorts of good stuff, all the really high sexy stuff that us consultants want to get involved with. And we were working in the catering area, working in the restaurant area. And for me, this was one of those moments where we were, there were initial challenges or thoughts at the start is, look, you're going to be going into some of these environments. You've got, people on the lowest pay, perhaps with the lowest academic achievements, why are they going to be engaged and all the rest of that sort of stuff. And what we found was quite the opposite. Actually, those teams really, really became engaged in what we were doing with them, to the point where it was the ideas, the thoughts, the suggestions came much easier from those groups than I've had working with people, in trading floors, doing derivative operations, doing, risk and credit for large banks, things like that. The whole team really got involved. They could see it added something to their day. It was a benefit to them, but also they could see that benefited the colleagues, it benefited the customer. And it was probably one of those easier environments because we could do activities with the team. So I remember one in particular where we were talking to the restaurant about big, large-scale restaurant, big client offices in London, about how do they get feedback of what the customers do or don't like, sort of thing. And they're like, oh, well, we ask them the sort of thing. And then I can remember walking around talking to the guys in the dishwashing area, and they said, well, we probably have the best site because we can see what the people are leaving.
What they leave, yeah.
And you went, yeah, what a bloody good idea. Right, now let's bring the two together and bring that as a group understanding. So then you did the team daily meeting, and in that, previously it would have just been the chefs. Okay, we're chefs and we're going to do this sort of stuff, a bit like that command and control. Well, then we got serving staff, we got the dishwasher staff, the pot wash guys in there to feed back about what they'd seen the day before. They felt that actually you're giving too much, because actually what we're seeing is a lot of the veg is being returned and things like that. So that focused in on the food waste, and we made a massive, big impact into food waste with this particular client, that was in the millions. Now, it might have only seemed a small amount for each individual restaurant, but on a scale the size of that business, you're talking multi-millions of pounds of waste that wasn't then being thrown away. And I think, you said the type of personality I am, I like to engage with people. I like to sort of get stuck in and do those sorts of things. And in this environment, it sort of worked for me as an individual. It worked for that environment very much, that we could really sort of work together and deliver a massively improved outcome. And again, I think even at the start, there was sort of, well, the chefs won't make any changes. And we managed to do, for all those boring and lonely people out there like me who like lean, something called 5S. We managed to get that into their day. And I know you did as well on the cleaning side of it. And I think that was, the other part of that is, early on in my consulting career, this was probably one of the sort of early starts in my career, was don't assume that people will know stuff. And what do I mean by that? I can remember you working on that cleaning project. And it's like, so where's the instructions for the guys to do stuff? And here's the book. Nice, long, loads of writing. Yeah. And you're going, that's great, but half the team can't speak or read English. Yeah. The other half the team can't read, even though they maybe have English as their first language. So some assumptions from some department somewhere, like, well, best way to do that. And they wondered why the outcomes weren't there. Yeah. Well, as you found out, let's actually show them with diagrams. Let's, those sorts of things. You went, surely they knew that. They know their business. This is their business. This isn't our business. This is their business. But they didn't understand truly what it was. And again, you start get that view that everybody in their individual parts is doing the best they can. And the guys in that area weren't doing wrong, but they hadn't sort of thought a bit wider. They were doing the best endeavours to show their value, show that to be compliant with whatever it needs to be, but didn't understand the full end to end. And again, a lot of what we've ended up doing with clients is getting them to sort of understand that full journey. What does that customer go through from the point of when they think about it to the point of when they receive it? And a lot of businesses, that's their challenge. And for me, the Compass one really,
people will work that out anyway.
Yeah. Those activities we did with that particular client, really, we got physically to the end to end and really saw that. And that's taken me then into other clients and really to start to drive to get them to understand the full end to end.
What I love about it, and, hearing what you're talking about and having experienced it myself, it was about simple human connection and understanding the difference between how things should have worked and how things actually worked. Yeah. But actually, at the same time, there were conversations happening in lots of different businesses about technology and how technology is going to be the answer. So in that environment, it might have been, we need a robotic Hoover to come in and improve the cleaning. But actually, there was so much opportunity in just how things were being done, regardless of whether we're going to get a robotic Hoover or not. And I feel like we're almost missing that grassroots stuff a lot of the time, because there's so much focus on what's the new technology that we need to bring in, what's the latest robot or whatever. Yeah. And actually how it's being done at that kind of human level has so much opportunity that we miss, because no one's going in and connecting as you did with those people.
And I suppose technology is absolutely fantastic and applied in the right way. It's a bit like, I know some of those teams had the initial sort of recharge battery ones, but they only lasted 10 minutes and they've got to look after an entire building sort of thing that they need 5 hours. So yes, it's great and it's all well and good. And yourself, that example of the lady who was filling in the Excel spreadsheet with numbers and then using a calculator to calculate the numbers, because whilst
she didn't know how to do the formulas.
Yeah, somebody told her you should use Excel, it makes it easier.
Yeah.
That's it. Nobody had told her, because it does the calculation for you. So she was there still with a calculator calculating it. And I use that, and it's a very simple example, but I use that example with a lot of clients to say, just because you've got the technology, if you haven't interfaced it correctly, if you've not understood how it works in your process, it doesn't matter that you spent £1 billion on a whizzy super duper thing, because the fundamentally, at some point, it's going to interact with the world. And you need to understand what those points are. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the human dimension behind all of this, because everything has got a human involved in it. And if you don't understand that or bring that to the fore and then build around that, you're going to lose out. And that's where the biggest gains will come from. We know that we've done enough of these things to realize that.
And that is your superhuman quality. I'm going to use that word again. Is your ability to connect with other human beings. I mean, there are lots of people that are good at that, but you just have this natural ability to do it. I noticed it the first time I ever met you in that reception. I think we were at National Grid or somewhere like that. I met you in a reception building, and immediately I just felt like I'd known you for years. And that's kind of that essence. If we were going to put it in a bottle, you'd make millions. Martin.
If only. just to pay for the kids at university, yeah.
Yes. You wouldn't have that engine in bits. You'd have someone there to sort it out for you.
No, because that'd be boring. I can
you
do,
relish
I can
the
do
challenge. We've had your 3 proudest moments. I mean, they are one of many, I know, but they really give us an insight into what you are about. So I'm interested then to know how that all comes together to kind of distill the secret to success in the eyes of Martin Gibson. What have you got for us?
Well, hey, you know me. That's a really.
I know you're cringing. I can see it.
I know. So anyway, to try and answer how I approach things, I'll tag it how I approach things, and then you can tag it how you wish. And I suppose for me, this is the essence of who I am in terms of. I know, and we talked about it earlier on, is worry about the things you can deal with, things you can change. And when it comes to approaching a challenge, I suppose for me, I break it down into what do I need to do in order to get to that. And perhaps that's a bad thing. Perhaps I shouldn't be. Perhaps I should be much more wary and go, oh, gosh, that challenge sounds a bit too much for me. Why can't I achieve that challenge? And whether that's a learnt skill, whether that's just naturally how I've come over things over the years. But, for me, it's okay, that's the challenge. Okay, well, what am I going to do to get there? As long as I'm going to put the effort in, I'm going to run. So, I left school, and trust me, this isn't a sort of a, oh, woe is me sort of moment, but, I left school with GCSEs, not that many, joined the RAF, had a fantastic career in the RAF and definitely got more out of it than probably the RAF did. They put me through university, they put me through an MBA, but I didn't if you'd have said to my 16-year-old self, you're somebody going to university, you'd have gone, somebody like me doesn't go to university. The careers talks we all had at our school were more about, sort of what career you're going to get, when you're 17, 18, you're going to work here, you're going to be a secretary, you're going to be, whatever it was. It was, I don't recall any conversation about what university you're going to, how are you thinking about that? Don't get me wrong, a lot of my friends who went to school went off to university, but it wasn't a natural conversation. Whereas now it's almost, that's what you do.
It's a given, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Whether it is the right or the wrong thing sort of thing. But I suppose as I then moved through that and given the opportunities, again, I went for those opportunities with the premise that I'm going to go for the opportunity, but I've just got to know what I've got to do or work on those parts to get to that. So even working on consulting projects, there's some, when you first look at it, you go, wow, gosh, it really sounds challenging. And I suppose my first point of view is then, okay, so what do I need to do that? What are the things, who do I need to talk to? Because do you know what? My level of knowledge is much lower than people around me. So who do I go and find that from? What do I then need to do? What do I need to learn? What approaches? Who can I bring in? Because, it's about the people around you, people like yourself. If I bring the right people in, that's how we can sort of move forward on this and build those outcomes. So, we talked about, you made a comment about an engine in the garage. So I have a sort of an old car that I drive around the track occasionally, and the engine blew up on it last year. And yes, I could go and get another engine, or I could do things. So I thought, well, fine, we'll strip it apart.
Let's do this.
It's in sort of 500 parts in the garage. Now, there's moments in times you go, what's going on here sort of thing. But, it came apart. It'll go back together again. I might make it more efficient by having bits left over after the build. But I suppose that's just, Lindsay, my wife, will find that frustrating. I know that's for sure, because she'll sort of go, look, why are you doing it? Just let somebody else do it. Just do something else, something like that. I'm like, no. I do become then, I suppose, a bit, not obsessed is probably the wrong word.
Dogmatic.
Yeah. particularly if somebody says, well, you can't do that. That's the sort of trigger where I go, well, then
I'll show you.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing. But again, it's not based on that I'm going to do it just because I'm, Martin Gibson and all the rest of the things. It's based on the fact is that I will find a way, whatever that way is, I will find a path. And that path might not necessarily always be me. That might be bringing people in. That might be passing it off. But ultimately, the outcome will happen and we will get to that end point. So I suppose if that's sort of reflecting on others, it's just, the half empty, half full analogy for a glass. And I suppose that's definitely been me in the half full side of it. But then how do I move forward on that? So I suppose for me is if people say, I don't know how to do that. Well, it's the classic one, we're all going to go and run a marathon. I can't run a marathon. Well, I didn't say tomorrow, but what we'll do every day for the next number of days is we'll go and run around the block a couple more times. Then it may take a year, 2 years, 3 years, but we will get to that point. And I suppose for me, that's how I do approach these things. That's how I understand it, how I break it down in my own mind. Because again, if you didn't, I think you might go in your head to achieve what you're trying to achieve.
So what I'm hearing is you set a goal or there's a challenge placed in front of you. And what many of us do is that feels insurmountable. I'll talk myself out of it. And when that self-doubt kicks in, what I'm hearing is there's a question that happens in your mind that is, well, how might I achieve it? And you don't necessarily need to know the answer now, but you're going to go and do that problem solving to work out what are the parts that will fit together to get me to the outcome. And it's almost like you might end up not achieving it at some point, or you might end up achieving it. It's not really determined at that point, but it is just a decision that you make that there'll be a way, I'm going to find the way. I really like that because that's a really good way of people interjecting when that self-doubt creeps in, because it's simply a question, well, how might I go about it? And it just opens up the thinking and then gets us through that moment of self-doubt. So that's a really good takeaway. And I'm going to call that the secret to success, even if you won't, because it's, it's done you all right for these years.
It's managed me to get through what I need to get through. Yes. Yeah. And I suppose it's, if people can sort of approach it in that way, will it help them? Yeah, I'm sure it might do.
Definitely.
You've got to have the mindset behind that.
Oh, do you know, I just knew this was going to be like a conversation like we used to have in the old days. I mean, it doesn't,
No, this feels far more sensible. I mean,
well, yeah, probably. And I don't drink anymore, so there's no gin involved.
Yeah. I've given up as well. Anyway, some
people come on the podcast and I might not have met them before, and it's always a really good conversation, but this just feels like a conversation with an old friend that's full of nuggets of inspiration.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Oh, I've missed you.
Likewise, yes. It's been far too long. We shall find a way. Now we can travel again.
Yes, probably another 3 years will go by. But at least we've had this moment, Martin.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll put that down on my list.
Yes, another proud moment to celebrate. So thank you for all of your wonderful insights and for being so human and superhuman during this last sort of 45 minutes or so. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and I will speak to you again soon.
Will do, Angela. We'll look forward to it.
And so, just like that, we're at the end of the podcast. I hope you've enjoyed your time listening today, and a big thank you from me for taking the time. I'd really love it if you would be able to leave a review, because it really does help us to get noticed. And if you haven't already, why not subscribe, and then you never miss an episode. I wish you a lovely rest of the day, whatever it is that you're doing, and I hope that you stay safe and well.